Hey, hello, what's up? My name is Mekkah, and welcome back to another Fire Emblem archetype tier list. Today, we are going to be tiering the magical girls of Fire Emblem. A long time ago, I did the Fire Emblem magical boys, you know, Merrick, Asbel, Urk, Azel, Soren, those kind of people. And some people wonder, where's the girls at? Well, this is where they're at, and there's quite a lot of them. Not as many as the Pegasus Knights that we had to split into two, but still quite a lot. I have to be a little bit selective on who to include. So I used a couple of criteria to figure out who to put in here and who I can leave out for another day, another time. First of all, they have to be female. No guys in here, no boys, girls only. They have to start out unpromoted, and they have to be able to promote. This is why, for example, I felt comfortable leaving out Deirdre from Genealogy of the Holy War. I wanted to make sure that these are like mostly early game mages, or maybe like slightly under-leveled ones, maybe like kind of est kind of yellow units. And they have to be like spellcasters, like they have to use like reason magic, anima magic, black magic, that kind of stuff for the most part. The reason for that is I still want to do like a cleric list at some point. Use people like FE7 Sarah, FE8 Natasha, Echo Silk, those kind of people. And I want to save those for a different kind of tier list, and I want to have some material left for that. So these are mostly like the spellcasting mages. And well, as you can see, we still have like 2.5 row of them, so there's plenty of work to do. Let me go over some that I've included, and then along the way I'll go over some that I have not included. So here we have Linday from 3 different games. She's actually in more like 5. She's in FE1, FE3, both books, FE11 and FE12. Of course, this tier list maker doesn't have FE1 or FE2 sprites in here, so that's why a couple faces are missing. But we have her FE3-1, FE11 and FE12. Then we have May. She's in Gaiden and in Shadows of Valencia. I'm going to discuss both, but again, only FE Shadows of Valencia portraits here. Same for Delthea, or Jute, I think her old name was in the patch. Sonia, Julia. Again, I left out Deirdre because she cannot promote, even though she's the same class as Julia. We have Tiltu, we have Tinny, we have Linda, who is Tinny's substitute. If you don't pair Tiltu, you won't get Tinny, you'll get Linda. And yes, I know she's called Linday and she's called Linda. I think that's the most logical way to refer to them, so that's what I'll be doing in the future. We have Lenoan and Sarah and Miranda from FE5, Thracia. They really like their magical girls, apparently. We have Lena from the Binding Blade, and Nino from Blazing Blade. Lute from Sacred Stones. Ileana is in both Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. We have Muriel from Awakening. Tharja, or Tharja, I think I prefer saying Tharja from Awakening. Nyx from Fire Emblem Fates. Dorothea, Lysithia, Annette from Three Houses. Quick note on Three Houses, in case you don't know. For Three Houses, I pick students that appear canonically as some of these classes. That's what I did for like the Wyvern Riders, for example, the Armor Knights. In case of mages, it's usually more like they just kind of... It's pretty obvious which ones of the students is magically focused, and I don't think anyone will contest that these are magically focused. I wonder why I don't have someone like Marianne in here. And maybe I forgot, like, Flame also is not here. The reason for that is I'm saving those for the cleric kind of tier list. I find those more like faith magic focused, if you will. But I know they have like their proficiencies either way. I just need an excuse to not put them all in one tier list, because I want to save some for some other time. So it's not that I don't think Marianne is not good at using reason. I know she can use Thoron and all kinds of stuff, just as well as some of these units can. I just need to separate them by some way, and I need to save some for later tier lists so that I don't have to like put all the Three Houses characters in one tier list. So nothing against their utility or anything, I just picked these 3. Because they seem to be the most reason focused out of all the magical girls in Three Houses, but really you can go almost any way you want. Because, for example, like Flame has like a hidden talent in reason, I believe, so she's almost as proficient as the others. But yeah, these are the most magically focused students when it comes to reason magic, I believe. And then we have like this strange GBA sprite here. We have Sia from The Last Promise. I plug The Last Promise every once in a while on these tier list videos because I just enjoy playing that game. Like, not everyone has played it, but the people who have, they pretty much enjoy having Last Promise units on here. And when I don't have enough units to like fill up 3 rows, I tend to just throw them in for fun. Sia is a female mage that joins pretty early in The Last Promise, so I felt like including her was pretty fair. And she's fun to discuss. She's like a couple of unique qualities. And that kind of goes for all of these. They all have like their really unique things about them. For one, a lot of people really love them. A lot of people really like their female mages for some reason. It has to be like the cuteness factor, or just the fact that they're fun to use. They are some of the most fun units to train. Not always the most optimal ones, I will be fair and say that some of these have been very overrated in the past. For example, Lena. Fans have been pretty insistent in the past that she's good, but I don't think she's that great. Spoilers. Same goes for Nino. Everyone knows how much Nino is loved by the Fire Emblem community and how much of a pain it is to train her. especially if you're trying to go fast. And I do need some kind of standards for these units, so some of these will not end up on the higher echelons of the tier list, I can tell you, but some of them are actually really good. Some of them are pretty good. So we'll see how they hold up under scrutiny. Now generally these units have low HP and low defense, and that means they have to be protected. And then they have like really high attacking power. Like some of them have like personal spells like Aura or Thoron, or I don't know, just really high magic stats in general. That makes it easy to set up kills for them if you want to. And most of the time that means that if you set up kills for them, they will get their kills with even like a little bit of chip damage. And that's convenient. Sometimes it takes a bit more training than others. Some of them join like really underleveled, and that can be a big problem when training them. But it always feels very rewarding when you do, because with some exceptions, a lot of these turn out like really fast and dodge tanky, and of course mages have perpetual 1-2 range, so not only does that make it easier to train them up because you can attack from almost anywhere, avoid counters, that makes misses less disastrous, because you know, if you miss against an enemy you don't die instantly, like I don't know, Slimlands Amelia or something. And then once you train them up and they become like dodge tanks, or maybe even like HP tanks or Nosferatu tanks, it's just so rewarding to see them crush everything with 1-2 range, and they're really high magic set. They start like one-shotting things. Some of them have access to like long-range tomes like bolting or something. So they turn into like these really fun killing machines. Now this is all well and good and a lot of fun, but it's not always the most optimal way to play, and they're not the most self-sufficient units sometimes. Sometimes they just take more effort than they're worth, really. And what is worth depends from player to player, but I tend to judge these units based on how efficient they are most of the time, and you know, how much effort they put in, and like how much you get in return, you know. And that's not always equal with these. Sometimes they are less optimal to train than others, but we'll see how they hold up under scrutiny, alright? So, as always, let's start off with the Arcaneans. So, we have the 3 versions of Linday. So, as I said, Lena joins in pretty much all versions of the Arcanean games where Marth is roaming around and seizing castles. And I guess we'll go over their FE3 incarnation first, and the FE1 as well, even though I don't have any FE1 sprites. So, in FE1 and FE3 Book 1, she joins like a little over halfway. No, I'd say more like a little under halfway through the game, but very, very underleveled. And this is a big problem in FE3 and FE1, because in that game you don't get an EXP bonus for joining underleveled. Every enemy is worth a set amount of EXP, most of them around 30, 32. So regardless of whether it's like Linday or, I don't know, Jagan or Sita killing something, they get the same amount of EXP. So catching up with her level-wise is basically impossible, unless you really favor her. Now, one great thing about Linday that she has that a lot of people don't is Aura. It's pretty sure it's Linda only in FE1 and FE3. So that means no one else is going to take it from her, and that gives her a huge amount of attacking power. But unless I misremember, I don't think it one-shots at base. I think she needs some magical levels. And these early games, Linday, I'm pretty sure only has like 20% magic growth. I think it's like called strength growth on Transforce, but it's basically magic. I think it's even called power in some patches. But the point is, until she's one-shotting things, she's not one-running anything, which means you need to kill setup for her. The other problem with these early games is that other units don't really need kill setup for them, whereas Linday does. Like at the point where she joins, a lot of people are like sufficient at one-rounding a lot of enemies. Not everything, but quite a lot. That means chip damage is less wonderful, and it means that other units also need to slow themselves down in order to help Linday out get levels. And that makes her Book 1 and FE1 setups less optimal. Now the hard thing about rating this particular like sprite of Linday everywhere in the tier list is that she's also used for FE3 Book 2. And in FE3 Book 2 and then also in New Mystery, which we're going to discuss in a little bit, she joins a lot earlier relative to the other incarnation. She joins in chapter 3, and that's like, there's still like 25 chapters left or something, which is insane. There's a lot more. Maybe not 25, but quite a lot, like most of the game. And the early availability helps a lot. Still has the personal aura tome. Can use Nosferatu as well to like really tank enemies. I don't believe Nosferatu is even in Book 1 or FE3. FE3 Book 1 or FE1. So that also helps her quite a bit, durability wise. I really enjoyed using Linday in FE3 Book 2 in particular. Especially once you get not the star shards, the star sphere that gives weapons infinite uses basically, because you put it on someone and they never deplete their weapon uses, and it also increases their growth rates. And then they just you can just put Nosferatu on her, and like as long as she's raised up, she can just counter and kill everything. I've used that in some chapters really successfully because it just lets her slaughter everything and gain so many level ups. It's super insane how good she becomes. Of course, that is a late game pipe dream. There is some work to be doing up to that. FE3 Book 2 Linday still has the same problem where a lot of units are self-sufficient, more self-sufficient than she is, and that can make it a little tough to train her. But Aura generally gives her the damage she needs. Early game people are not one-rounding, so the chip damage is welcome. Limited mobility is a bit of a problem for most of these mages actually. There's quite a few games where mages have like 5 move, whereas other units have like 6, and this is one of them. that can be a little bit annoying. So I would say FE3 book 1 Linday and FE1 Linday is like D tier if we're being generous, I think. And then the book 2 version is more like upper B tier maybe. So I'm gonna like be nice to her and put it like around here. It's very tough to rate her in like 3 games at once, so it basically ends up about average, I guess. Then we have the Shadow Dragon Linday. Basically the worst version of her, I think. Shadow Dragon especially is not a great game for her. Donna used her in like 0% growth a couple times, in very niche situations, but mostly she has the same problems at the FE3 book 1 one. She does get more XP for killing now because she's underleveled and there's no set XP gain anymore. But on the flip side, that game is more easily broken than ever with all the forging and stuff that you can't really take advantage of. And yeah, forging a tome for her is not really an option. I don't think you can even forge Aura if you wanted to. I don't think it has a base cost. I think that's the main problem with it for forging. But there's this not much of a reason to use her once she joins. There's like a lot of other units you already have that have kind of come into their own, and there's not much of a return in raising her. I don't believe in Hard 5 she doubles reliably even if you train her. And that's a big problem, because if she's not doubling, she's probably not one-hit KOing. I don't believe Aura can one-shot on Hard 5 with her. So I would say she is definitely like a D, or I wouldn't say E tier, that's like reserved for like really bad units. But I think she's like a pretty big problem. And usually, that's funny, because usually the same unit is usually in the same tier. They just kind of differ a little bit, but because of Linday being in like so many different games in this one, she ends up being rated a lot higher than this one. But yeah, Shadow Dragon Linday not very good. New Mystery Linday though, pretty damn good, because as I said, she joins very early. Aura is not her personal tome anymore. In fact, it's also not in Shadow Dragon, but it basically is, because the way it works in the DS games, in FE11 and FE12, Shadow Dragon and New Mystery, is she can use it at E rank. And other than that, only female units can use it, but they can only use it at B rank. Except for Linday, she has it at E rank. So getting a female mage to B rank tomes is quite an investment. I can't really think of other units that can do it recently. Maybe like my unit in FE12, but even he is not going to have B tomes by chapter 3. So for the most part, I believe Aura is still basically Lena's personal tome. Now, I've actually been playing some FE12 Lunatic lately, and I'm trying to use Linday. I'm not super impressed. I needed to buy her an Angelic Grove from the Lunatic Stat Booster shop in order to just survive enemies. But, you know, the Aura chip damage is pretty good, I will admit. And enemy priority in the DS games is pretty funny, where they tend to go for like whatever they can do most damage to most of the time. And because Linday is so fragile, she's really easy to lure enemies towards and do like big chunks of damage with them with Aura. If you tried it in other games, like the GBA games, they would just attack someone else because Linday counters, unless they could like kill Linday. But here, in this case, you try to make it so that only one enemy attacks her, and that makes her like pretty good for enemy phase chip damage. That's like very niche. I know not everyone plays FE12 Lunatic. If you play on lower difficulties, I think she's like fine. I wouldn't say like high B tier, but I'd say she's like a fair bit better than this somewhat overall mediocre version of her, like her combined FE1, FE3 book 1, FE3 book 2 versions. So I feel comfortable putting her like up here. I think she's pretty good. One more like funny thing to say about FE12 Linday is if you play Lunatic Reverse, like a total masochist, then Nosferatu tanking becomes much more interesting. Lunatic Reverse means that enemies on enemy phase, or rather, okay, so on player phase, if you attack an enemy that can counter you, normally you would attack first, but on Lunatic Reverse, they attack you first. This makes Nosferatu very interesting, because what happens is the enemy attacks you first and you take damage. Then you use Nosferatu and you heal that HP back that they did through Lunatic Reverse, so Nosferatu suddenly becomes like a lot better. It has limited uses, so you can't always use it, and sometimes she gets one-shot by stronger enemies, or if you don't give her a robe, but it can be a very interesting thing to do. So I just wanted to note that as like a potential pro for Linday on higher difficulties. Again, a lot of people haven't played this game, let alone the highest difficulties. I'm also taking into account like our lower difficulties for this one. So next up is May from Gaiden and Shadows of Valencia. I'm almost at the part where I get May in Shadows of Valencia, so I may change my mind quite a bit on her after I've played that part, but right now I haven't been there yet. But I have used her in the past, at least in the early game where you basically have to use her. She joins early on in Celica's Part 2, and she's basically a chip damage bot. I remember her ability to use Thunder, which is an interesting advantage she has over Bowie, for example, who can only use Fire for a little bit. I don't remember her being particularly good long term. I think she's mostly good when you have very few other options to train, but I don't remember her being a particularly good XP investment. That doesn't mean she cannot be good ever. There is definitely a viability, there's definitely like a viable way to use her in the end game. I just found that it takes like really long to promote her. She's like a particularly high promotion level, especially in Gaiden. I'm pretty sure it's no different in Shadows of Valencia. Let me just double check that real quick, but I'm pretty sure she promotes later than a lot of units. Yeah, so in Gaiden, a female mage like May promotes at level 20 to a priest, or I guess priestess. Shadows of Valencia, they made it a little less egregious. They went for level 14 instead, but goddamn, that is a long time. Considering someone like I don't know, a mercenary or an archer or a knight, they just promote level 7, and like even male mages promoted level 12, that is pretty damn late, and that's a big problem. Because you want to promote as early as possible in these games because of the way the promotion gains work. So not being able to promote is a big oof. And as for spell lists, in Shadows of Valencia, for example, May has Fire, Thunder, and Aura at level 9, which is like a lot of damage actually. And then Seraphim at level 14, and then she can also get some Silence spell at level 6, I think. Most of it, not super impressive. I mean, the Aura is going to do a lot of damage, but I remember her having like some trouble doubling as well, depending on the enemy, of course. It's kind of like a fragile balance whether you double or not in these games, because the AS threshold is only 1, whereas in GBA games, for example, you only need 4 AS to double. So I'm not going to rate her very highly, but I will say I haven't used her in long term much. So maybe she's much better than I'm thinking, but I don't think she's very good. So I'm going to put her like at around, I think she's like a little better than Linday in Shadow Dragon, for example, and definitely FE3 even. Maybe not better than Book 2 Linday, I'm not sure. I don't think she's as good as Book 2 Linday. I do think she's better than Book 1 Linday, so that's kind of dicey. I guess she's also better than FE1 Linday, so we'll just put her up here. Her early game utility, when you have like very few options, is pretty good, so I'm giving her some credit for that. Not gonna say she's a Jagan or anything, but it's more like you don't really have many other options, and of the options you have, she's not a liability. She actually helps you. Then we have Jute or Delthea from Echoes. First of all, I really fucking hate what they did to her in Shadows of Valencia with her face with like the tooth and everything. I know a lot of people find it cute, but it just reminds me of a baby. I really hate the baby face. It's just I don't remember exactly what her Gaiden incarnation looks like. I just don't remember being as angered by it as the baby tooth version. I know it's like a trope, but I just really hate it. I'm sorry if you're a fan of it. I just really don't like it. Utility-wise, she has Aura at base. That's really her main selling point, I think. It's also like her main annoyance because she's an enemy for a bit. You gotta recruit her. But once you have it, it's on your side. It's a lot of chip damage. It also hurts herself a lot because using spells hurt yourself. Not that big of a deal at that point in the game, I think, because you have a lot of options to heal her. You have some rings that restore HP, so it's not that bad. But I guess it makes her more liable to dying, and that's bad. But yeah, a lot of chip damage, not a lot of doubling. I don't believe she joins very underleveled in both Gaiden and Shadows of Valencia. And I think in general she just has a lot of issues. I really wish she could teleport like the way she does as an enemy. I'm pretty sure she teleports in both Gaiden and Echoes, I'm not entirely sure. But that would have been like super annoying to deal with for enemies, but unfortunately she can't. Because mobility is a bit of a problem for her. Being underleveled is a bit of a problem for her. I have never trained her very much, but she reminds me a lot of people like Nino and Miranda, where it's just more effort than it's worth. She does more damage than those at base because of Aura. I will say that much. But overall, I'm not a big fan. Very similar to Shadow Dragon Linday, in fact, when you think about it. So we'll just put her around here somewhere and hope nobody yells at it. Hope nobody yells at me for it. But again, not the most unit I'm most experienced in, but I think I can judge her pretty fairly based off what I've seen. Now Sonia is the route split unit of Shadows of Valencia and Gaiden, and I've always held the belief that Dean is better than Sonia, and I always believe that everyone looking to recruit the best possible unit they can, they should go for Dean. But there's a lot of people who insist otherwise. I think Lucky Crit made a video ages ago where he talks about their route split in detail, and I think he ended up recommending Sonia. I think the big problem with Sonia is similar to Delthea, where she's just too underleveled to get anywhere, and promotion threshold for her is so high. Let me just double check how far she's from promotion again. Yeah, so she joins a level 5 mage even in Shadows of Valencia. That means she's 9 levels from promoting in the game that's most generous to her. And like that late in the game, you really want to be closer to that. Like this is past halfway Celica's routes in part 3. You really want to be like at a higher level by then. And her stats, they don't look that impressive to me, honestly. Durability particularly needs a lot to be desired. I know she has a steel shield when she joins, but you can give that to anyone. And if you give the steel shield to her, it's also going to like hurt her speed stat. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of Sonia. I also think the difficulty of her chapter is overrated. Some people recommend picking Sonia because her chapter is easier to complete, since the enemies that she joins with, or like that join her in battle, are a bunch of enemy witches that will teleport to you and kill you. Whereas Dean's enemies are just mercenaries with 1 range, so they're easy to trivialize with Pala and Katria. But I've never found the witches particularly difficult. The witch AI is notably nerfed so that they don't kill your units all the time. So there might be like some RNG involved, but I never thought it was so bad that you have like ever any need to pick one over the other for that reason alone. I don't think a slightly more difficult chapter is worth a unit that's worse by so much. Especially if you don't plan to use her, of course, but even if you do, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Then what we also have is the problem of is just Sonia just being kind of, yeah, fragile and not that strong. I will say she learns a lot of interesting spells from what I've seen. She has like the Entrap spell in Echoes, which I would really enjoy messing around with on my Let's Play, so I'm gonna see if I can get her there. I've always been recruiting Dean, so I'm gonna recruit Sonia just for the variety, I think. And that is gonna be super sweet to try out, just getting an enemy close to you. I remember that being very annoying to play around in Fates, for example. So that's something I'm interested in. She's definitely like rewarding to play up in the sense that you get a lot of things out of her that you wouldn't get out of other units. It's just not worth the trouble generally, but I think she's interesting. But I can't rate her utility very high, so I'm gonna put her like around here. I'm not sure if she's worse or better than Delthea. They are on different routes. Delthea joins on Alm's route, whereas Sonia's on Celica's, and they only converge for like one chapter basically, so can't really say much. They can't really compete directly. I'm tempted to like favor her over her higher chip damage with Aura. I don't think Sonia has enough to offer later on to make up for that, but I might be wrong. Next up is Julia from Fire Emblem 4, Genealogy of the Holy War. Again, I left out Deirdre because she kind of promotes, even though she's the same class as Julia. Both start off as a shaman, and Julia can promote into a sage though, so that's why I included her. She can also use staves at base, which is a huge boon. I do still think that the spellcasting part of her is like a big part of her identity. She's not like a healer, for example, like Lena is in the same gen, who cannot use spells until she promotes. So I think it's fair to call her like a female mage. I have a huge personal attachment to Julia just because of the tragedy in the story, but I'm not going to let that impact my rating of her at all. I hope. First, big obvious elephant in the room, foot unit with only 5 move in Genealogy of the Holy War, where most units have 8 to 9 movements. Even Selef, who starts out unpromoted, is going to get a horse really soon and going to outpace her, which basically disqualifies her from participating in like significant combat for a lot of chapters. Gen 2 does have quite a few spots where Selef can be going into different directions, and you can still have your foot units contribute a bit. A little more than Gen 1, in fact, I think. So that helps a little bit, but it's still like a huge hurt in her utility. There's like 2 things that to Julia really stand out. Well, 3 that I really need to discuss. The first one is the fact that she uses staves, so she can, for example, warp people across castles next to her B-rank staves. You can heal people if that is necessary, so that gives her access to XP even if she's not near anything. So she can at least promote if you want her to be. And when she promotes into a sage, she gets 6 move, and she gets adept, and she gets much better stats because the promo bonus is nuts because Kaga loves sages. I mean, we just discussed like 5 sages, so that makes sense. That makes Julia pretty viable for combat later on if you want her to be, even if she's never getting near the action. And then she has access to the Resire Tome. She can also get Aura if you seize a different castle. By the way, recruiting Johan and Joel here has no real impact on whether you can get Aura or Resire. It's almost equally easy either way. I go into detail on it on Mags' Let's Play at some point. I don't really want to elaborate on it here because I don't want to like accidentally say something wrong because I didn't think in advance about it. But I've said it plenty of times. Don't worry about Johan and Joel here. You can always get Resire. Just seize the lower castle first with Selef and then talk with Julia and Selef and you'll get it no matter what. And you will always have the opportunity to because the castle turns red no matter what. So you can always get Resire, which is much better than Aura. It's almost as powerful but much lighter, so she can double with it. Julia is one of those fortunate units that just gets Pursuit. And she also has Adept at base, actually. Not a very high proc rate, but it is there. She also has Nihil, so not very significant Gen 2 overall, but there are some spots where it definitely does matter. I'm not going to spoil where. So those are all pretty good traits to have as a combat unit. It's just Resire is so heavy that generally she won't double many enemies on the field, but it can be helpful in the arena against enemy mages. And Resire in particular is nice because it basically fixes her low durability. Anytime an enemy hits her, she can just hit back with Nosferatu. It is a little inaccurate sometimes, but most of the time she will hit, heal up her HP, and she'll be fine. So even if she gets doubled, she can usually come out on top. Even against like Miriam in the arena sometimes. It's very interesting to see, actually. Her magic is absolutely insanely high, thanks to the Major Naga Blood. Naga Blood. That's what she's got. And her res is also insane. She's really good against the Dark Mages in Chapter 7 that are like super annoying to a lot of her player units. They almost get one-shot by those enemies, so if they get hit and they have to get healed like twice to survive again sometimes, Julia's like, nope, I'm just gonna Resire tank them all day and like beat them to a pulp. If she procs Adept, they're dead in 1 round. If she doesn't, they're dead in 2. and are like ready to be finished off by other units if you want them to. So she's very good against those. I think she's intended to be the way you tackle them, honestly, considering how tough they can be for your other units. Like even Oifi's getting 2-shot by those guys. Good against the mage sisters as well if you want her to be. She's immune to the triangle attack thanks to Nihil, for example, so that is fun. And of course, very late into the game, she gets that super powerful tome that just crushes everything. So, I'm not going to spoil exactly what it is for like the 2 people that don't know, but that makes her like really good in the final chapter. She does disappear for a little bit, which hurts, and she doesn't have a mount, which hurts. But if other than those 2 factors, she's pretty solid. I don't know if she's as good as FE12 Linday. I'm going to put her like around here somewhere. She's not like part of an efficient clear in FE4, I don't believe. Not part of like any of the fastest solutions. But she's overall like a pretty self-sufficient unit that can get wherever she wants, level-wise, and just contribute to your team. And definitely has more long-time availability than, for example, May. So I'm going to put her up here. Next up, we have Tiltu from Fire Emblem 4 Genealogy of the Holy War. Same game as Julia. I don't know why I'm saying it so elaborately like that. And Tiltu joins in an interesting situation. Only level 3 in Chapter 3, which is over halfway of the first generation, so very underleveled. Almost like an S kind of unit. I put her in my top 8 units that I like to use, even though they're bad, or like top 8 quote-unquote bad units that I love to use. It's a pretty old video of mine that somehow still gets views. I like her a lot, but I'm not going to say she's good, but I like her a lot. The thing that makes Tiltu fun to use to me is, first of all, like her design is just super fun. Like the purple hair, I don't know, it's just super cool. Thoron is a spell she comes with that's super powerful. 20 might is as much as a Silverlance, but it hits on resistance, so it hits very hard. Doesn't want to kill things unless she has Wrath activated, which she has. She has a personal skill called Wrath. Anytime she's below half HP, she's going to do double damage. She's basically going to critical hit, and that can one-shot things. It's, of course, very risky to play around with, because if anyone hits her while she's in Wrath range, she's just dead. And generally, that's not worth it. Again, no mount in FE4 is just a death sentence for unit viability in general. She joins in a spot where there's not much else going on besides a lot of enemy pirates. Claude around to heal her, and then maybe like Aranis is going to come near, or Bridget. But that's basically it. Everyone else is away. So she has some like time on her own to get some XP. Still not enough to get a level get her to level 20 and promote her, and that is a problem. If she doesn't promote, she's not getting anywhere. Even if she promotes, she's not getting anywhere because she only gets +1 move. She doesn't get a mount. She just gets the War Mage class, which is not that great. But at least she has staves, right? At least female War Mages get staves in FE4. So she can use Warp and heal people, and I guess that's okay, but not great. It's not like... It doesn't really add very much to your team to train her. It's just fun to spam Thoron on stuff and watch her kill things. She can't use any other spells either. Kind of annoying in Chapter 4, actually. It's almost all Wind Mages, which have Weapon Triangle over her, and she cannot use like fire spells, for example, to get Weapon Triangle, or even Wind spells to be faster. So that sucks. Also, speaking of faster, she doesn't have Pursuit. She doesn't double attack anything, but Wrath is honestly almost as good. Almost guarantees she clears the arena as long as she keeps trying, because she keeps end up at 1 HP whenever she loses, and then you just try again and you keep going until you get enough RNG your way to just kill and win. But it's not very good. It's not very good. I like her though. I like her a lot, but I can't really put her any higher than like here, I think. She's not difficult to train for like a ranked or anything. I don't know. I'm gonna put her below Sonia just in case she's better, but yeah. I'm not even sure if she's worse than Sonia or not. She's fun to train, and she's also fun to pair, because if you pair her, you get Tinny, and if you don't, you get Linda. And Tinny can be like a lot of different things, so it's hard to rate kids as always. And Genealogy is a little easier than in like Awakening of Fates for me. Oh, I forgot to mention, by the way, there's a lot of kids missing. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about kids, and ever since I posted last year, I never felt great about just putting them in like C tier or whatever, and not knowing exactly where I should put them. So I'm missing people like Ophelia, I'm missing people like Rajat, I'm kind of missing some others that I'm kind of forgetting about right now. I'm missing Orochi from Fates. I said if I don't have enough familiarity with a unit to just talk about them off the top of my head, I'm not gonna put them on this tier list. It doesn't have anything to do with me not liking those units. I just don't want to sound like I know what I'm talking about when I don't, and that's pretty difficult to do when you don't know what you're talking about. So for now, I'm just leaving them off. I could tier them, but it would be pretty meaningless to me, and I don't feel comfortable talking about them. I am planning on playing Birthright ASAP to at least get to know Orochi, but using kids units, like rating kids, even if I knew what I was doing, would still be so difficult, because they can be so different depending on like what skill kit you give them, what parent you give them, when exactly you recruit them, because they can like auto level or like instantly promote. So that is something that's going to take more time for me to research, And I do want to rate these other units. I don't want to hold off on making this tier list just because these other units exist. So I've never claimed that I'm going to be rating all of these in this one tier list video. What I might do at some point, once I've like reached expertise on this, is make like a kids tier list video. So keep that in mind. I'll try to like link this timestamp early on in the video so you know why I'm leaving them off, so you're not like too surprised. But yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, Tinny is not that difficult to rate because despite different pairings, she doesn't perform that differently. She's always underleveled in Gen 2. She joins in Chapter 2, which is second chapter of the second gen. And in there, she's like a level 3 mage or something. It's like super underleveled compared to what you have. Like, even though only 1.5 chapters have passed, a lot of people will be like level 10 or something. And you need to reach level 20 to promote, and that's a problem. She has Wrath, just like Tiltu, so she can clear the arena. She can maybe one-shot some enemies. Doesn't have access to Thararjan because Tiltu is a Thunder Mage with B rank Thunder. And then she gets another +1 rank from her Turtle Blood, which puts her up to A rank. But Tinny is a normal mage, a regular mage, so she has C rank in Thunder at base, and then the Turtle Blood puts her up to B, but that's not enough to use Thunder, which is A rank. So even though, not enough to use Thoron, excuse me. So even though you just got the Thoron Tome from Ishtar, she cannot use it, and that's kind of unfortunate. So that makes Tinny like a little weak. She generally cannot use any other better tomes either. You don't have Tornado yet, you don't have Volcanon yet, so even if you had to correct Holy Blood or Class for that, she wouldn't be able to use them. I think the most basic pairing for her, it used to be Azel. You just give that to like pair Azel and Tiltu, so that you get Pursuit on both your mage kits and like pretty high magic growth. It works pretty well for casual playthroughs. You just double stuff, and if you have Wrath, you double crit. It's pretty good. Doesn't make them like great. It's like Azel was already pretty mediocre, and Tiltu's not much better, so you just kind of get two slightly improved versions in a generation where everyone is like super overpowered. So it doesn't like make them very good. I've always felt like the best pairing for Tiltu is Lewin, because it makes Arthur so much better. It turns him into like a good unit compared to a mediocre unit. But unfortunately it doesn't improve Tinny much, and in fact it makes Tinny a bit worse because now she doesn't have Pursuit. I don't think it hurts her that much because she can still set up kills for her, especially with Wrath activated, and especially since she's not really like very strong regardless. She can always clear the arena anyway, so it doesn't really change much about that. And like she gets added and crit still, so there's like still hope for her. You can give her the Pursuit Ring if you really want her to double. So she's still salvageable if you really want her to be. And I've always felt like Tinny was someone that you have to want to train in order to train, if you know what I mean. Like, she doesn't need to have Pursuit to be viable. But it does hurt her a little bit. There's other pairings too for Arthur, like Lex Arthur for example, or Lex Tiltu gives both kids Paragon and Vantage, and you get Vantage Wrath. But the problem for that one is it's hard enough to get Arthur to one-shot things with Vantage Wrath, and it's important that he one-shots with Vantage, because if he doesn't, he's probably gonna die since he's like running around at half health and relying on like going first and critting to survive. There's only one magic ring available up to that point, and Arthur kind of needs it to one-shot things, and that means Tinny probably won't have one. And if Tinny doesn't have one, she's definitely not one-shotting anything. And she's more unleveled than Arthur is, so she hasn't as much time to grow her stats, and that means she's just like a super bad version of Arthur. And I already don't like Lex Arthur very much, so I don't recommend this pairing if you want to make Tinny good. I don't know if Tinny's bad enough for E tier. I think there's like a couple other units I would like to put there instead. I think he's worse than Tiltu, and that's weird because, you know, she has basically Tiltu's growths and then some. But I think Tiltu is in a better position to be good than Tinny is, and the lack of Thoron doesn't like help either. Linda is like super interesting in substitutes. Like, I'm really confused as to how they made her this good. So remember what I said about Thoron and Tinny not being able to use it? She can't use it because she's a substitute but with Holy Blood. She has Turtle Holy Blood, and she's the Thunder Mage like Tiltu, so she can use Thoron right away. And once you recruit her and once you buy Thoron with her, she just uses it right off the bat, and pretty well too. Now normally the problem with substitutes is they don't have good skills because they don't inherit any from anyone since they're just static characters. But for some reason they gave her 2 really good skills. Like, most substitutes have maybe 1 good skill and usually none. Linda has Paragon and Wrath. I don't know why they did it. I guess they just liked her. If they liked her that much, they probably should have let her promote to Sage instead of War Mage like all these other Tiltu kids. But still, she's pretty damn strong for a substitute. Still has the problem of low movement, low durability, low defense in general. But at least she does some decent damage, and she grows pretty fast. I would actually say Linda is a better unit than Tinny most of the time. If you take like all pairings into account, I think Linda is better than most of them. And also, she doesn't like require Lewin to be good, or like, I don't know, Azel's not a pretty big risk. I guess that doesn't really matter. But damn, she's a lot better on average than a lot of Tinnies. And like just Paragon alone makes her more viable. Because like in order for Tinny to have Paragon, you kind of need to take Lex from someone else and then have like a suboptimal pairing. But this is pretty good. Lena's pretty good. The male substitute in that one, the replacement for Arthur, Amit is pretty bad though. So in order to get her, you kind of have to, you know, sacrifice Amit. You kind of have to sacrifice Arthur's utility, which is a shame. I don't think it's as good as like Lewin Arthur, for example. I think overall you get more out of Lewin Tiltu than you get out of not pairing her. But I do think she's like really good for substitutes and generally better than Tinny. Because of Paragon and Wrath, like having both of those is just so nice. And like, and just the magic growth as well. And access to Thoron. Like that combination of things is something that Tinny can like never have through like any pairing. Next up we have 3 magical girls from Thracia, my favorite game. We have Lenoan, Sarah, and Miranda. Now Lenoan and Sarah are pretty similar units. Lenoan joins in level 14x or 15 if you don't do 14x. And she's like a sister, and the sister class is kind of bad. It only has like 5 move, and she's really low durability, like paper thin, like 14 HP, 0 defense, like midway through the game. She gets one shot by almost everything. But she can use all kinds of magic. She can use staves, which is the most important part. Staff utility in Thracia is at a premium. It's worth its weight in gold almost always. In fact, I would say always. She only has C rank, but that's still pretty high for base rank. And she only promotes in chapter 21. She's like a story-based promotion. So you have all the time in the world to get her to beat rank staffs, and then once you get her there, you just promote her to Sage, and you have an A rank staff user, and she has like really good magic growth, so she's probably going to reach 20 magic with ease, because her growth is good, and her promo bonus is like +5 or +6 magic or something. That's really all you need to be like an S tier unit late game in Thracia. She's super strong there. It does take her a while to get there, and at base, she's like mostly going to be using like Physic, Torch, Magic up, mostly for her own benefit, but if you can benefit other units from it, you should definitely do so. I generally go like, okay, Safi's already at A rank staves, Salem was almost there, so let me just Magic up with Lenoan to get her some Safi XP. So there's usually no opportunity cost to doing so. So I wouldn't say Lenoan is an S tier unit for all game long, because until she promotes, she's gonna be like using C rank staves and maybe some B rank staves. The one that you need the most is Warp and Rescue, and those she cannot use for a pretty long time. So I don't know if I put her up to S tier quite yet. I would say for now she's like an A rank tier unit, because it does take some investment to get her there. It takes her a while to promote. If she had the option to promote like right away, I'd say she's as good as Salem, who is basically like an S tier unit. Because if you only play like the last 4 or 5 maps of Thracia, you would think Lenoan is an S tier unit. You really would, because like the staff utility is so fucking good. She also like really high pursuit critical and the ability to use Resire or Nosferatu. And she has the option to take the Wrath scroll if you want her to. She's like one of the 2 good candidates for it. The other one being Nana. And Wrath is so powerful on her because like you need to raise her HP a bit to make her more sustainable. Her 14 HP is not going to survive a lot, but if you make her survive enemies, or if you have her fight like Dark Mages, of which there's a lot, then she can take them on with the Wrath Nosferatu. Takes a hit, crits in return with Wrath, heals all about HP back with Nosferatu, and just repeats. And she can take on like a bunch of, for example, Hell Mages that put her to 1 HP. They usually combine with Jormungandr, which poisons. Most characters, if they get hit by 2 of those, they're dead. They just get poisoned, then they get hit by Hell and they're dead. Doesn't matter what order they attack in, they're basically dead. Lone doesn't care. She just heals herself back up, and then she bypasses the bad thing about Hell, which is that it reduces you to 1 HP. Super good unit late in the game with Wrath. I usually give it to Nana, but she's pretty good too. Sarah is good for, honestly, most of the same things, but she's a lot better, I feel like. She joins later, only joins in a route split, so like 16B routes or 17A route, I do believe. So less time to contribute, but she can promote almost instantly. She joins at level 7, but she has Paragon, so you just have to use like a couple stabs, like 3 or 4 times, and she's ready to level 10. And even though Sarah has insanely good growths, like insanely high magic skill speed, and yeah, basically those growths, luck as well, she's like really good to promote early, because like her bases combined with her promo bonuses and a couple level ups she gets on the way are so good that she'll get kept like almost all of her stats that are relevant, especially her magic, almost right away when you promote her. And even after you promote her, she still has Paragon and 19 levels to go, so she can still get some level ups that way. And there's just no reason not to promote her early. And she joins with B rank staves at base, so that's already better than Alone. And then she promotes into A rank staves right away. So you get basically a free A rank staff user somewhere in like the mid to late game of Thracia. That's so overpowered. And she can also attack if you want her to. She has Miracle and Wrath, both of which are skills that I almost never use because she's so fragile. Has like the same durability as the Gnome most of the time. So that's not a really good use of her time. Generally, if these skills are activating, she has like a chance of death. So I try to avoid doing that. But boy, like her staff prowess, like Restore, Warp, Rescue, Rewarp, Magic Up, Silence, Sleep. Those are just like the stats I can come up with right away that she can use basically from off the bat. And those are also the stats that Lena can use really well, but she can use them earlier, and she's so good at doing them. Such a freaking overpowered unit. There was a time once where I did like an FE5 draft and I had to like decide between Glade, the leadership star bots, and Sarah, and for some reason I picked Glade, then changed my pick to Sarah right away because I was like, wait, she's freaking good. Why am I not picking her? She is so good. She's also the only one who can use the Kia staff late in the game if you want to hashtag do it for Avel. Also a very relevant part of her utility. A small bit, but it's still there, I guess. But most of it is about her other things. Her staff use generally. It's so important in Thracia to have A rank staff use late in the game. If you're not training her, you're missing out. And honestly, you shouldn't be missing out. Such an overpowered unit. So good. So good. Not as good as like, I don't know, Radiant Dawn Har or anything, because he dominates like the whole game. But late in the game, she feels just as instrumental. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have Miranda, also from Thracia 776. And Miranda is not too good. Miranda is in fact pretty damn bad. She's only available in B route, which is the worst route to go to begin with. I'm not going to hold that against her, but that is a reason why people often go A route, why I often go A route. Because, yeah, she's not very good. She's basically FE5's equivalent of Nino. The one good thing about her, I guess, is just Wrath, and that lets her crit stuff on any phase, but the problem with her is their durability is so bad that if she gets attacked, like in FE5, Wrath works differently than FE4, right? Wrath is like, if you counterattack an enemy, you crit on the first hit. So it seems pretty good to me. Yeah, unfortunately her base HP is like, I don't know, like 16 or 17 or something, her defense is like 0, so a lot of enemies just one-shot her straight up, Ballistas just kill her. Dark mages do a ton of damage to her and then poison her, probably finish her off. It's not pretty, it's not pretty. She can be trained. Anyone can be trained in Thracia. Anyone can be made good. Scrolls do like a lot of work on her. If you play on Paragon mode, she's going to level up super fast because she's so on a level. She's like level 5. But doing so is a big pain. There's a funny clip out there on YouTube somewhere where Velkema has like Miranda as a mage indoors and promotes to Mage Knight. And Mage Knight is like reduced movement indoors because it has to dismount. And so she actually loses movement upon promotion. That's the saddest thing I've ever seen. Let's just nerf this unit even harder. Because like a lot of late game chapters are indoors. So it really hurts. It really stinks. And that's just like one bad thing about it. But also just like bad base stats. Very low durability in particular. I think she can use spells besides fire spells. But not a very good unit. It's not recommended. I've never actually trained her besides that one run where I literally trained everyone to level 20. That is the one time I did it, but never again. Never again. Next up, we have Lena from the Binding Blade. She's okay-ish, maybe. So let me take you back to the old times. People were debating on like these nerdy Fire Emblem forums, Lu or Lena. And a lot of people like Lena more because Lena has higher magic. Particularly, she has a higher magic growth. Her growth is like in the 60s to 70s, I want to say. Lu's is like 35 to 40%, I believe. So that's a big difference, especially if you think growths matter. They do matter, but not that much. What also matters is speed, and Lu has so much more speed. He joined, well, first of all, Lu joins like 3 or 4 chapters earlier, whereas Lena joins at like the tail end of chapter 8. Lu joins at the tail end of chapter 4. That's a pretty big difference, and that gives Lu a lot more early game utility. Big problem with Lena is just how underleveled she joins. Even though she joins relatively early in the game in chapter 8, or basically chapter 8x, because she joins, like, she can't do anything in her starting position. But yeah, her damage output at base is like 10 damage max, I think. She's like 5 or 4 base magic, and then fire has like 5 might, so there you go. That's about how much damage she's going to do at base level. Her skill is awful, so if she uses anything but fire, she's going to be very inaccurate. If you attack someone on terrain, or like a particularly dodgy enemy, she's probably going to miss, or going to miss when you don't expect it. Her speed is beyond awful. A lot of enemies double and one-shot kill her. Pirates have a good shot at one-shotting her. Mercenaries will double her. I think archers have a shot at doubling her if they don't use a steel bow. If they use a steel bow, they just Oko instead. I don't know, what more do you want me to say? Like, she's like, it's almost like you're training Nino in FE7, but Lena is like early game instead, and her growths are not as good. That's Lena basically. I'm not saying it cannot be done. Anything can be done, even in FE6, even in Iron Man setting. I've trained Wendy, I've done it. It's fun, but it's not what you would call self-sufficient or optimal, and those are things that matter in a tier list setting. Those are things that matter when you rate units. I'm sorry, I didn't make the rules. I did make the rules, but I think they're viable rules. Lena is not very good, but a lot of people like her, and they like her because her magic eventually becomes insane. She can cap magic fairly easily actually, and she can one-shot enemies, especially people who play on normal mode. They always like, when they use Lena, they go like, wow, she one-rounds manikies with fire, and wow, she one-shots them with 4-blaze. And yeah, she has a really high magic cap, and she can one-round things, and that can be a rarity in FE6 where enemies are like so bulky. So she's one of those units that's like super satisfying to train, but getting her there is not really worth the input if you're like looking at what you're putting in versus what you put out. But it doesn't mean it's not fun, and it doesn't mean it can't be done, and it doesn't mean it's not possible, but it also doesn't mean that she's good. That's basically what I'm getting at here. Like her base level performance is bad, but again, having 1 to range and hitting on res gives her an out. It gives her an out of that like unleveled hole that she is in. But I think if you were to rate her objectively, she's like maybe D tier, but honestly like just a better than E tier unit, I think. One more thing I need to mention about Lena: you can get boltings in this game. There's like one in the chest in 16, I think, and then more are buyable in the secret shop. Buyable boltings are so much fun. Lena is actually part of a super rigged LTC clear where she can use bolting on bosses. One of the reasons she's viable for that is because she supports Roy quickly enough to be used in an LTC fashion. And I think she can also support, like, I don't know, Astor or something, like one of the Armor Knights to get like more hit and crit. It's very convoluted. But killing bosses with bolting, super satisfying and super fun. And she does have like the highest magic cap in the game. So she's not without benefit. It's just those benefits aren't good enough to really put her like very high on a tier list. Also, I will say for the record, I hope Lena, if Binding Blade gets a remake, I hope Lena gets a bigger role in the story. I would not be offended if they had her retreat instead of die, if she was killed, if it meant that she got more time to talk to Roy instead of Miranda's, because a lot of people don't really like Miranda's very much in FE6. They think he's kind of dumb. I think it's just supposed to be a way for Roy to stand out. I've never minded Miranda's very much in FE6, but I can definitely see why people want Lena to have a bigger role in the spotlight, especially after Sita in Shadow Dragon has shown how interesting of a character she can be. Also want to give a shout out to Rising Sunfish for a lot of her amazing art with Roy and Lena in it. Some of these pieces are some of my favorites, and she's kind of moved on to drawing Golden Deer characters instead, because those are also very likable. But I will never forget some of the artwork she's made on Roy and Lena in FE6. It's super gorgeous and wholesome. Well, speaking of controversial characters, next up on the list is FE7 Nino. Now, if you thought Lena was bad when it comes to causing flame wars, Nino is even worse. Like, holy shit, people have dragged out wars that lasted 80 years over Nino because of just how much they like her. Now, I already went over Nino in detail in my Est video, because I consider her like a pretty prototype Est, basically. Pretty standard Est kind of type. So I'm not going to go too in-depth on Nino. I think almost everyone knows exactly what I think about Nino. Like, basically just replace Lena with Nino, and you kind of get what like Nino's performance is like. If you've never tried her out, go try her out, see how much you like her. Basically like super unleveled mage late in the game, bad base durability, good growths, but not worth training over your other units. Like, by the time she joins, not only are your other magic characters better, but anyone you have on your team is better. And I have videos where I've trained Nino up. I train her in like negative growths, where she's like as bad as she could possibly be because she loses stats instead of gaining them. Still a lot of fun. I got a level 20 Sage. Didn't manage to reduce all her stats to 0, unfortunately. But I tried very hard, but it was still possible. So I know how to train Nino. I know it's not difficult. I just think it's not worth the effort. And it is fun to do, though. It is a lot of fun to do, but it's not very productive of your time, other than if you just like seeing a really strong mage kick a bunch of ass. Oh yeah, I will say one more thing about Nino. If you play reverse recruit with FE7, then Nino is one of the first characters to join, and that automatically makes her one of the better ones. Her durability is still kind of low at her low HP and defense. They still exist, but at least her magic and like speed go up like super fast. So you just have like a really good early game mage, like a better version of Urk. So that's really fun to use. But I would still say Nino is like probably worse than Lena, but better than Miranda, I think. I think that's like a fair assessment of Nino's capabilities in this kind of fashion. Again, this doesn't just talk about endgame performance, it talks about the whole thing, and Nino has almost no availability to speak of, And the little availability she does have, like more than half of it is probably spent being spoon-fed kills. It's not great for your self-sufficiency. Alright, going next we have loot from Fire Emblem, the Sacred Stones. And loot, a lot of people when the game first came out, I think were like, wow, we get Nino, but instead of like chapter 26 or 28 or something, we get her in chapter 4. That's insane, because loot has like a very similar build. Low HP, low defense, but really high magic, and her speed is a little less good. I do believe she has like no trouble doubling on normal mode, but on hard mode I think she's less likely to double things until later in the game. Arthur, for example, is quite a bit faster, and she's by no means the fastest unit in the game. She can double like the enemies in her joining chapter because those are like very slow. She can double soldiers in the next chapter, but something like a fighter that isn't being weighed down or something, that takes a while for her to double. Once she does double, she does one round, so the key to using loot is generally just getting her there. There are some speed wings available, but not that many, and they are like pretty contestant because speed wings are like the best stat booster. This is important because if she doubles, she just kills everything. And again, once you have a unit with 1-2 range that kills everything, that makes her offense so good and so flexible. A lot of people like to promote loot to Sage because of the higher magic cap. Sage is a magic cap of, I believe, 30 for female sages. I think for mages it's like a little lower. Or for male sages, I should say, it's a little lower. But I think actually the better promotion option is Mage Knight. Mage Knight does only have a magic cap of around 26 or 25, which seems a lot lower, but loot doesn't reach it until like very, very late into the game. Like, I'm talking promoter at level 20, and then level her up all the way to like level 10, so that's basically like level 20/10, 2010, you know what I mean? That's very late into the game, and at that point, you have access to Excalibur, the S-rank legendary tome, so that just one-shots everything anyway. And it gives +5 speed even, so doubling isn't much of an issue either way. Like, even despite the fact she gets weighed down a little bit, and that's another thing. She gets a bit more constitution from going Mage Knight, so their speed is also better. And if loot doesn't one round, it's usually not because she doesn't have enough attack power; it's because she doesn't double. So the more you can make loot double, the better it is. And Mage Knight gives her more attack speed. Also lets her lose less speed from other tomes. She can use fire without being weighed down, but I think as a sage, I think she still gets weighed down by, I don't remember if it was thunder or Elfire that makes her being weighed down. But again, if you can use a better tome as a Mage Knight compared to a Sage without being weighed down, then you can still compensate for that attack power difference. And it's like it's not even that big of a difference, because until you get to the cap of the Sage, which is like very far away, or until you get to the cap of the Mage Knight, it's like they have the same magic, they have the same magical promotion bonus. But Mage Knight is one more con, so I do like that better. But I know I'm like, a lot of people like Sage a lot better. I can see why. It's just say Mage Knight is, I think, overall a more efficient choice. Not to say that because I like mounts. I haven't even mentioned the benefits of the mount yet, but +1 move and Canto and Rescue are both pretty nice to have. Not super great, not as good as the Paladin's 8 move, but still nice to have more mobility. Because that's another thing loot doesn't have, that a lot of the other units in Sacred Stones have, is more mobility. She would get outranged by people like Seth, Cormag, Vanessa, all those higher mobile units. And as a Mage Knight, she has a higher chance of getting everywhere. And for weapon ranks, it does the same. Like, she can even use staves and stuff pretty effectively. She gets D rank, which is a lot better than the FE7s and FE6s E rank that sages get on promotion. It's pretty nice that they made it like D plus something on promotion. It's pretty cool. And she can actually get to warp if you work really hard on it. I know in LTC runs, Arthur has a better shot at getting warp as a bishop, but Luke can certainly make it. We did a draft race a while ago with Gwimpage and Kirby Masta and Sanyo. Gwimpage got Lutz, and in a speedrun setting, normal mode to be fair, but the speedrun setting, actually managed to train Lutz all the way to a Mage Knight that could warp people. And he beat everyone else, he got a faster time than everyone else, so there's some merit to Lutz. I don't think she's quite an optimal unit, but I do think she's one of the better growth units. I would say she's around as good as FE12 Linday in higher difficulties, probably better than Julia as well. I don't know, like, within Sacred Stones, I would say she's a bit worse than this. It looks like really high for her B tier. But I do feel like her performance is around the level of FE12 Linday, maybe a little bit worse. I don't know, it's kind of weird. When I think B tier, I don't really think loot. Like, I think right now where I'm putting her is more accurate for like compared to the other mage girls. But I think in like an FE8 tier list, I would sooner put her in like C tier maybe. But relative to these, it looks correct. People ask this a lot in the comment section, or ask this sometimes. It's like, hey, you rate these like within their own games or according to the girls in comparison. I feel like she's wrong in this tier within this list, but in a like FE8 tier list, I would probably put her like C tier instead, because there are a lot of better units in FE8. I feel like everyone who has a mount is better than or like equal to loot, I feel like. Maybe not Ford. Maybe not Ford. Then we have Ileana from FE9 and FE10. Ileana in FE9 is, I wouldn't say she's like Lute, but she has similar availability where she joins pretty early on, early enough to where you can raise her up. FE9 has always been a game of, not a matter of can this character become good, but more like how much investment does it take, because the game has bonus experience, and you have so much bonus experience in the English version in hard mode that you can just do almost anything with it. You can make almost anyone good, even Ileana. Ileana isn't necessarily terrible. I think most people compare it to Soren. I think Soren is the better one between the two. He has better availability. I think his durability is about equal. They take about the same hits, I feel like. Generally, most enemies will two-shot them for most of the game. They can both use staves. They can also use knives if you want, but staves are just better. Ileana's more focused, supposedly, on thunder magic, but they can all use like all kinds of magic because they're both just mages. They don't really have like different classes or anything, so you can give her wind magic if you want to, for example. A lot of people get hung up on the fact that Ileana has the strength to wield tomes with less speed loss than Soren, but Soren has the better speed to begin with. And at some point Soren will get like 1 point of strength, and that will help him lose less speed from tomes as well. I think people generally need to look more at strength, or like more at speed than strength when it comes to mages. And generally the speed difference between the two is like very minimal. I remember debates about these two characters up against each other being very boring because they are so similar. Soren does get the better attack power eventually because I think his magic and magic growth is just significantly higher. But I do know Soren has like pretty bad spots in the early game because the wind is just so weak and his bases aren't exactly good. Ileana's like a bit of a better start in the fact that you don't have to raise her as much. She comes at a higher level, but she's not that much better. She still takes some effort. Eventually you can turn her into something good, but that's just FE9 in general. I think in the context of FE9, Ileana is overall fairly underwhelming because of how many broken units you get. Like, almost everyone can be good or be made good. I personally prefer using Tormod if I'm going to use a mage in FE9, despite the fact that it takes more effort, because Tormod has celerity, and that's like a very cool unique trait that, actually helps. I swear, it's not just because I'm a whore for movement or anything. It's just, it's so nice to have a mage that can keep up with your paladins. That's really what I like. And the difference between effort it takes between the two is kind of minimal to me with the bonus experience being available. In Maniac mode, and like the Japanese Maniac mode where you get much of this bonus experience, I can see Ileana being better than Tormod though. I can see Ileana being better than Tormod period because of the availability difference, but celerity is a big difference maker. But compared to like the cast at large, Ileana is no Oscar or Kieran or Titania or probably not even Ike, but she is fairly good for early game units. I would say I would put it like around here, I think. Not great, definitely better long term than May and Shadow Dragon Linda, or even FE3 Linda. Radiant Dawn Ileana is very different, very interesting, but very weird. So most units in Radiant Dawn are only available for Part 1 or Part 3, or later than that. But very few units are available in both. I think Ileana is the only one actually. She joins in 1-3, and she stays with the Dawn Brigade until the end of the final, the end of the end game. And after that, she just joins the Girl Mercenaries in 3-2. And for most units, this would be a godsend, because that gives them like the best availability in the game. Like, who else can boast to have this much availability? I can't really not think of a unit that's like more available than Ileana in Radiant Dawn. It's insane how much she's around. The problem is, when she joins in the Dawn Brigade, she's pretty good. She's pretty over-leveled, actually. I think she's like at the level where she can promote instantly if you wanted her to. She's capable of doubling some enemies in her joining chapter, even on hard mode, where the enemy stats are like pretty inflated. And she's pretty good for like chip damage and just helping out. She can survive a hit, not from everything, but I think her HP and defense are good enough to like take one hit from most enemies. Maybe not tigers or like really high attack fighters, but most enemies she can take a hit from. So you don't have to protect her as badly as like Leonardo, Laura. Those people get one hit KO'd a lot. Ileana does not. And then as the game goes on, she becomes less impressive relatively because other units level up faster. XP gains in Radiant Dawn are very lopsided. You tend to either get a lot when you're under-leveled, and then as you grow, it quickly diminishes. And then around endgame, she's one of your worst units because the Dawn Brigade just has so many units that just join and just take over because of how good they are relative to the Dawn Brigade. You got like Zyhark, Volug, Jill, Taronio, Nyla, the Burger King, all those people. They're all just so strong compared to Ileana that there really is no unit slots for her generally. You can field her, but she's not great. Then what we can do is you can transport items from the Dawn Brigade by giving them to Ileana, and then when she rejoins the Girl Mercenaries, she'll still have those items. And the cool thing about this dynamic is that the Dawn Brigade, they're not lacking in gold. They're like filthy rich. They have much more gold than they need. So what you can do is you use the gold you need in one endgame to make some forges. I think that's like the only part where the Dawn Brigade can make steel forges. So you want to make some forges, you want to make some iron knife forges. You might want to forge, I don't know, a couple steel axes for like Nolan and Jill or something. And then you just give Ileana like a bunch of expensive stuff like the blue gem and the Paragon scroll maybe. That's pretty good to give away. You can also keep it on Dawn Brigade, it can go either way. I like to give away Celerity, put that on Ileana, give it to the Guerrilla Mercenaries, because the Dawn Brigade, they spent most of part 3 just being like all huddled up and defensive, because the Lagoose chapters and everything in part 3 for them are so scary. But the Guerrilla Mercenaries, they get a lot more out of all these offensive scrolls. Like something like Resolve, for example, you can put to great use on the Guerrilla Mercenaries. So I like giving those kind of scrolls to Ileana. Yeah, that's good. I don't really like counting that towards her utility though, because it's not really something she does on the battlefield or like anything else. It's just you ferry over inventory, but it's the same as if you have like a convoy, like one of those traders from Gaiden. I think it's more like that. So I'm not going to give her credit for ferrying items from the Dawn Brigade to the Grove Mercenaries. I think that's something she does almost outside of gameplay, basically. It's more inventory management than something Ileana personally does. And Ileana herself is very unimpressive in part 3, because there's, like, while if the Dawn Brigade are, like, super rich, they're not XP rich, if that makes sense. They are very XP hungry, in fact. Like, if you've ever played Radiant Dawn on hard mode, you'll find that you're almost always short on XP for something that you want. Units like Nolan, Aaron, Edward, Jill, they're all very XP hungry. And they need a lot of levels to stay viable, because they have less availability than the Guerrilla Mercenaries, but they have much more levels to gain to get to tier 3. And if you don't make it to tier 3 by like part 4, then you are really under-leveled and struggling to keep up. And Ileana herself cannot get enough XP in part 1 to really keep up very well. And even if you do, because she gets taken away from the Dawn Brigade, that's another unit that you could have had in the Dawn Brigade that's like, you know, can help them out. And they need enough help as it is, so it never feels good to ferry your XP into Ileana. It's very suboptimal to use her. And then no matter how much you put into her, she's not going to be viable for part 3, because her stats, when it comes to that part of the game, are just not going to hold up, even if she's trained. Rejoining in 3-2 with those stats, she's going to be far worse than even like, not even the good Guerrilla Mercenaries like Mia and Ike and Har, but like worse than Nephany and Boyd and, I don't know, maybe not worse than Rolf, but kind of on that level, you know? Her HP and defense are just so terrible there. She's one of the few people who can use Thunder Magic and Radiant Dawn. Thunder Magic not known to be particularly good, like not like it's kind of weak and inaccurate. All it really has is high crit rate, and it's not even high enough to rely upon. So most people don't really like Thunder Magic, and Ileana's like the only one who can use Rex Bolt in Radiant Dawn. She's the only one who can reach SS Thunder, but that alone is not worth putting up with her for the entire game, just to have an extra weapon in the end game. So Ileana's generally not worth it. So in summary, good part 1. For like the early parts, and then after that she kind of fizzles out in part 1, and in part 3 she's just worthless, and I don't really count the item ferrying. So I would say with some early game utility, like kind of like a worse version of May almost. Like if you only use her in part 1, I think she's like a positive, but if you use her beyond that, she's just pretty bad. I'm gonna put her like around here, I guess. I don't really know where to put her. She feels more like May, but I feel like overall viability wise she's more wrong like among these units. I guess this is okay. I don't really know for sure. I think she's pretty hot garbage overall. Not a very good unit Radiant Dawn, but the inventory thing is interesting. Next we have Muriel from Awakening. Now I have used this unit, surprisingly enough. I only played Awakening like once or twice, but I used Muriel in one of my playthroughs. I remember her being okay, and of course personal experience doesn't mean everything or anything, and I was like new to Awakening. I didn't really optimize her. She's like an okay unit. Capable of using the E-rank rescue staff with reasonably high magic. That is always something we gotta note when it comes to like Awakening characters. I don't remember how reliably she was at doubling. I don't remember her magic output being particularly amazing. Awakening enemies can get very power creepy in the mid to late game, and I don't believe Muriel is one of those units that you could just like put out there, solo entire armies without some ridiculous setup of like defensive pair-ups, and by that I mean like a pair-up that gives her a lot of defense or avoid or something. I don't remember her being one of those units that crushes everything. Definitely not a unit you want to raise on Lunatic, I feel like. I brought this up with Sumia and Cordelia. I thought those were units that you could reasonably train up a bit in Lunatic mode. And that's really stand out, because other than that, it's like who else do you want to use on Lunatic? Like Frederick, Robin, Crom, that's about it. Muriel, not one of those units for sure. Doesn't mean she's like completely unviable. I think she's better than units like Stahl and Sully. But Awakening Lunatic is just so oppressive. On hard mode, I think it's like the opposite problem where she just doesn't stand out enough to where she's worth raising, but it's not impossible to use her. It's just like, why? Yeah, I don't remember her being particularly impressive. Kind of like an average unit almost. I would say it's like a less impressive loot is kind of the vibe I'm getting, like kind of like Ileana, May, Linda kind of deal. This is like the rough estimation of what I would give her. Again, I'm not an expert on Awakening, but this is kind of what I feel. I would even be open to putting her down to D tier, but I don't think she's that bad. I just don't think there's anything like particularly noteworthy about her. Then we have the other Awakening character, Thararjan. Now there was a time where the entire internet was obsessed with Tharja. She would like get number 1 or not, maybe not number 1 or 2, but like pretty high in popularity polls, like Choose Your Legend and everything. Now everything seems more subdued, and now all you kind of hear about Tharja is the occasional cosplay in the subreddit or something. Like she's like the most popular cosplay character of all time, I think. Must be like an outfit being sold of her or something. I found Tharja as a character to be kind of cynical. I don't hate her as much as Camilla, but she's definitely soured me a little bit on Fire Emblem characters as a whole sometimes, so I try to ignore her most I can. I will acknowledge though, in Awakening, in the context of Awakening, where you have buyable Nosferatu tomes that don't reduce your weight and have enough might to hold their own, and a sorcerer class where you can get, you know, traits like Vengeance in a game where you have a lot of route maps, or quite a few, and you know, the ability to use the rescue staff and buy it, and you know, it's just very enemy phase based with a lot of ambush reinforcements where Nosferatu tanking is just the best job. I cannot deny that Tharja makes a very good unit for casual players, maybe not LTC players, but she is definitely one of the better units in Awakening when trained. Takes a little bit to get going. I remember trying to use her in like some kind of, I did like a no pair up run at some point of Awakening hard mode, and I was trying to use her there, but I never finished that run, so I don't know how she ended up there, but I was okay with Tharja. I was okay with Tharja as a unit, definitely. I wouldn't know exactly how to rate her. Feels like a bit of a better version than Julia and Luke to me, maybe. She doesn't join like quite early, but she joins, I think like chapter 10 or so is, I think, when she joins like a desert chapter. I know exactly which one it is, I just don't remember the number of it. But early enough to train, and pretty close to promotion if not already there. So not really underleveled enough to penalize or anything. Maybe she's even better than Linday in this, actually. She feels like a pretty viable unit to me. I might be overrating her. I might be like trying to compensate for how much the shift in tone in Fire Emblem annoyed me back then. But she feels pretty good. And in case you didn't catch it before, or you just going to this timestamp, I'm not including like Raja or any of the kids in here, or like Noir, for example, because I haven't used those characters and I don't feel comfortable rating them on this tier list. I don't hate those characters too much, or like I don't really hate them at all, but I just don't feel comfortable rating them on this tier list. But yeah, Tharja, pretty destructive, just needs some training, but seems pretty good to me. Then we have Nyx from Revelation and Conquest. Now, I've only used, I mean looked at Nyx in Revelation, where she's like the worst unit in the game, because she just joins at such a low level in such a weird place where she just barely does anything. Riff is one of the worst units in Revelation. That's saying something. That's a very bad roster that we got there, but she's pretty terrible. I know in Conquest she's much more viable. Joins a little early, relatively. Same base stats, but yeah, units around her are much less overpowered, or at least much less powerful. I've read different dissertations on Nyx and the potential of like early promoting her with like a Master Seal. I have never tried it, so I can't judge it. I've seen like essays on like how you can give her like Master Seal plus Speed Tonic and then just double like certain thresholds. I feel like such builds are almost always theory crafted and not really tried in practice, and seeing like how long they last. Because putting a Master Seal and like a bunch of Speed Tonics into a character that you're not going to use in long term in Conquest seems kind of dicey to me. I feel like that is a game where you can get better rewards for those Master Seals. I do know that's a game where like you want to promote a lot of units early, so Master Seal seems like a pretty hot topic of contention. And without that treatment, I don't think she's particularly great. I would rate Revelation Nyx as an easy E tier, and then depending on like how good that build is in practice of her early promotion, maybe like a C tier kind of unit. So I think it's fair to put her like in D tier overall if we take like the average of how bad she is in Revelations and how okay she is in Conquest. I think that seems fair. I know exactly where. It's always tricky with characters that appear twice. Again, I wish I could just like clone characters within a tier list and have like a label that says like Revelation or Conquest in here. That would make it a lot easier, but I do love using this tier list maker, so I'm going to keep doing it despite its flaws, just like Thracia. Love it despite the flaws. So for now, I'm just going to put it like in the dead middle of the D tier and hope I don't piss too many Nyx fans off that much. Alright, 3 houses time. So we have Dorothea, Lysithia, and Annette, 3 reasonably reason-focused characters. Dorothea, I watched her play, I watched her being used by Mangs in his first Crimson Flower playthrough. His first 3 houses let's play ever, so obviously it was very sub-optimized, but even in future runs, and even while talking to others, we've always found Dorothea pretty underwhelming as a combat unit. She has like 2 good spells that she learns early on. She has the Thoron spell, almost right away I believe, and she has Thunder of course, but Thoron is like the big one. 3 range, slightly higher crit rates, pretty high damage output. And there's Physic, she has like a Bane in Faith, but she also has a hidden talent for it, or like a budding talent. So once you train it all the way, you can turn it into a boon, and from there you can get it to learn Physic. And she has like a couple of other spells, but those are the bigger ones for like early game utility. But I think the big one for her later on is learning Meteor, because that provides the opportunity to provide linked attacks and gambit boosts from very far away without ever being in combat. And I think this is one of the biggest things about Dorothea. Now if you make her a Gremory, she has 2 uses of Meteor that she can use to chip. A lot of people like making her a dancer instead. I think Dorothea is a reasonably good dancer. Just because dancers will by nature, if you play casually, kind of fall behind in your playthrough, and she's still useful from a distance thanks to Meteor and Physics, so I think this is a good choice overall. She does have, I believe, a Riding Bane, so she will probably never get Move +1. I think Move +1 for dancers is a very overrated thing. People look at a little bit too much when choosing their dancer. I do like making Ingrid and Marianne dancers, for example, in the Blue Lions and in the Golden Deer respectively. So I don't think they're bad choices per se. I just think Move +1 as a thing is overrated, and I don't think you need the Riding Boon to get it anyway. It just takes a little shorter if you do have a Riding Boon. So I'm not counting that against Dorothea too much, the fact that she has a Riding Bane. And yeah, I think she should focus on like Reason and Faith anyway, to get like more spells if you want them. Mostly Meteor, that takes a while to get. I think there was an update to a 3 houses patch where linked attacks no longer work for units that were not supporting each other. You no longer get a hit bonus from Dorothea unless you support with her, but she supports a lot of characters anyway, especially within the Black Eagle, so I don't think this is a huge issue for most people. And I don't think Dorothea is often recruited out of house. I think most people who use her just have her into Black Eagles. Dorothea has like pretty annoying requirements to recruit outside of house because she uses like magic, and Byleth never really wants to focus on magic, so kind of want to focus on like a beast support with her if you can. Generally the way I recommend recruiting units anyway. But the point is, I generally see Dorothea in Black Eagles playthroughs, and I think within those, if you need a good dancer, she's good. You can just like not train her, give her XP or anything. Maybe get her to like level 5 or something for like quick promotion. But generally, I think the big advantage to using dancers is you don't have to train them. So I think she's a good dancer for that reason. She has like a custom outfit too. I guess that helps too. So overall, where we put Dorothea, I don't want to like rate her basis on like the basis of a merits of a dancer, because you can make anyone a dancer, so I'm not want to count that. But her Meteor utility I think is nice enough throughout the whole game that I would definitely put her like somewhere around here. I think she helps more than some of these other units do. But I think like as a combat unit, as like a student, she's not that good. But she is pretty interesting as a dancer, and I do love the Meteor linked attacks. It's pretty good. She doesn't really do much outside of it. It's a bit like having like a leadership unit in FE5, where they just give a hit bonus to everyone on the map. That's pretty good. Next we have Lysithia, probably the most controversial female mage we've ever had, and we've had a ton. Like, we've had Nino, we've had Lute, we've had Lena, but boy, people really love Lysithia, or they really hate Lysithia. Like pretty much entirety of Mangs' Let's Play with Chaz was just about bashing Lysithia apparently, or like making fun of Lysithia because people were so sensitive about it. I made a waifu video on Lysithia because I thought she was interesting to analyze. She was a good first choice for waifu, I felt like, because I wanted the first one to be not too complicated, since 3 houses analysis was like pretty tough to do. I think I've kind of found my groove and I can get into more complicated units. That's why I did Bernadetta. But Lysithia was a good choice because like she's so obviously a magically oriented unit with certain spells that you can use. And like the class paths that you could take were not too complicated. So Lysithia, if she can, like, my verdict on Lysithia's combat is like, if you can get her to one-shot, she is very good at combat. If you cannot get her to one-shot, she's pretty mediocre. I think on hard mode and normal mode, she one-shots pretty easily. Maddening mode, thresholds get a bit too high. She can still do it occasionally, depends on what you make her. if whether you're playing New Game Plus or not, whether you're putting gardening stat boosters into her, whether you're giving her other kinds of favoritism. I found she's short on one-shotting on maddening without too much treatment, but on the other hand, she can also use warp, and that is a really big boon. The ability to warp people across the map, it gives you a huge mobility advantage for other units, not just herself, so it's almost as good, if not better in a way, to have more move that you can give out rather than having more move yourself. She makes your other wyverns better, for instance, so the fact that she cannot keep up with him is fine. It sucks that she cannot use physic, for example. It sucks that at some point she does fall too far behind. A big problem with Lysithia and raiding her, I think, is a lot of people just assume that they give the Thyrsus to her. It's not a personal weapon, it works on anyone. Even people without a crest can use it, and that extra range can be useful on anyone. Lysithia uses it well because her spell list doesn't have like anything that gives +1 range. Like for example, Dorothea's Thoron. She has like a bunch of dark spells. Her spells are interesting though. Luna is very interesting, disengage resistance. Dark Spikes, of course, a very well-known spell, can kill the Black Knight or the Death Knight. I keep mixing that up. Hades is very powerful, and that can get into one-shot for sure. I felt like once she gets like Fiendish Blow from mastering the Mage class, that is when she starts one-shotting things for a while, especially on hard mode. I don't find Lysithia doubles too much, other than Armor Knights, even on hard mode. But again, your mileage may vary. 3 house builds are so different depending on what you do. So I think if you're like LTCing this game or trying to play efficiently, you almost kind of have to recruit or use Lysithia just to have the option of warping with her, and that makes warp a very good thing. Her combat becomes like very secondary in those kind of things. More like a casual playthrough, or just like trying to get through manning without skipping everything. I think Lysithia's output matters a lot less. Like she has such low movement that keeping up with your units is just almost undoable. Unless you make her Mage Knight, which takes forever. Mage Knight, Dark Knight, that's what it's called in 3 houses. I found that like to be more trouble than it's worth in most routes, but I've seen many comments claiming the opposite. Some people like giving her plus move items. I don't think she's a great candidate for that. But if you want Lysithia to keep up, that is one way to do it, I guess. I would say overall, I think Lysithia is like a lesser version of Sarah and Lenoan. As like a staff user, she's less versatile than them. But her staff utility and magic are like still high enough to where I put her up here somewhere. I think she's like still really good if you're playing 3 houses efficiently. If you're playing it casually, I wouldn't put her this high. But I think overall, her damage output, like she does have enormous magic. She does do a ton of chip damage, which is really nice, and like throughout the whole game. Once enemies start outnumbering you too badly to like chip enemies down 1-1, I think her combat takes a big nosedive. But that one-shot utility can be very nice occasionally. It's just, you really gotta protect her. You really gotta keep her safe a lot, because she's very fragile. She can actually survive early game maddening enemies with like a little bit of promotion. Like I think promotion up to Mage lets her survive like early game archers or something. I remember Rengor mentioning something like that. So I want to have mentioned the fact that she doesn't always get one-rounded, but she gets one-rounded a lot in maddening mode. Then we have Nets. When 3 houses was first released and we first learned of everyone's boons and banes, some units were very easy to figure out. We had units like Lysithia. It's like, alright, you're a magic user. Units like Raphael, okay, they're going to punch people when they're going to use axes. People like, I don't know, Ferdinand is like, alright, you're going to go on a horse, you're going to use every weapon you like. Annette has like boons in a very weird set of things. She's good at reason, and then, what else was it? Authority and Axis is like, what a weird combination of things. I think we over-focused on that a bit too much, and we kind of forgot that, you know, Annette is just good as rally bot. Like, rally strength at base through her personal skill, and then learning like all kinds of good rallies through her authority boon and authority list, I guess. It's just so good. She gets rally speed, she gets rally res, I believe. I think she gets like one more rally at like S authority, but it's generally not worth it. Rallying with her is so nice. She gives rally skill. That's it. She gives rally skill. I forgot. It's been a while since I played Blue Lions Maddening, but rallying early game is so good. It kind of depends. Sometimes it's better to attack with a net if you're chipping enemies down, because boosting someone else's damage output by 4 is generally worse than doing like 10 damage yourself with like, I don't know, a hit with fire or wind or whatever she has at base. For example, if a unit is going to take on multiple enemies on enemy phase where they're going to kill a boss, then rallying is better. And in situations like that, Annette can often do something in a situation where other units cannot. And I find that very valuable, especially on maddening mode. If you're like skipping a map, like warp skipping, or just killing a bunch of bosses quickly, Annette is also more useful than most units. Just because she can help people reach thresholds to kill bosses easily. Her increase in reliability is very nice. I've seen LTCs of 3 houses where Annette plays a big role. You can do like the weird thing where you make her a wyvern rider, have her fly around and use like the crusher axe to kill people too. Very interesting gimmick build. I've never tried it. It feels like something that's more for like hard mode and New Game Plus runs than like an actual maddening run. But again, I'm not gonna knock it until I've tried it. It seems alright to me, if you can pull it off. I think generally the way I end up using Annette is just rallying a lot, not really training her a whole lot. I mean, I'll go for mage to get Fiendish Blow, but it's almost like difficult to do because I just want to rally almost every turn. That like cuts into her XP. I wish rallying gave her XP. I know it'd be like broken as fuck, but I just miss the fact that she misses out on kills a lot. She can also heal people. That's also nice. The same goes for Lysithia and Dorothea, of course. They can heal people. Physic in her case, mostly more normal healing in Lysithia's case. She gets the recover spell. I remember using that quite a bit. I don't think Annette makes a very good dancer. I did that in my Blue Lions New Game Plus hard run. I didn't really like it very much because, again, I mostly want to like do other stuff than dancing. Sometimes I'd rather dance for Annette than have her be a dancer, if that makes sense. So I think Annette is like a very good unit in 3 houses. But it won't always show in her combat. I think she's better off as like a support unit most of the time. Another great thing about Annette that I forgot to mention is her authority boon makes her like a pretty good candidate for getting the Dance of the Goddess battalions, like the Blue Lion Dancers or the the Opera Company volunteers. Those have pretty high requirements for authority, and Annette pretty easily reach them. And she can also reclass as like a cavalier in order to use them. She can't use them when it's usually wyvern, sadly, because wyverns cannot use those battalions. But she can use them as like a cavalier or some other kind of high movement unit. So yeah, pretty good unit overall. Hard to rate because she's so different from most 3 houses units. Like even within 3 houses, she's pretty unique. But I would honestly I would either have her up here or maybe up here. I think maybe even better than Lysithia in a way, because I feel like she's more universally applicable. I think she's good for just about anyone. And then last we have Sia from The Last Promise. And Sia is... Ooh, she's so interesting. She's so cool. So she's, like most mages, is like having Lutz or Nino or something in the early game. Just pretty high speed and magic. Her speed is like better than her magic actually, but she's known for having really high magic. The Last Promise does a couple things differently than most games that makes Sia really good to me. One of them is the availability of the Hero's Flare Tome, which is a brave tome. But it's very light, so she can use it, I believe, without speed loss, at least when she promotes to Sage. And that just lets her quadruple enemies, so she does like a ton of damage to just about anything you face. A lot of the time, Fire or Thunder will be enough, but when it isn't, Hero's Flare is there. It's buyable in some kind of secret shop. You have enough money to go around, so Hero's Flare is very, very good in those situations. The other thing that really helps Sia, in my opinion, is that she's available in that game's equivalent of Siegfried mode. And that means that you can buy angelic robes for her in the armory of the last chapter of Siegfried mode. It's kind of a secret, but it's kind of well known at this point. And I think this kind of completely alleviates any durability problems she has for the main game. There are other characters that can use the robes, but not that many. There's like a flyer you want to give some to, Nana. You might want to give some to Sean. I can't really think of many others, to be honest. It's mostly those. And I think she makes a really good candidate for getting at least one, but honestly, multiple. Every single one of them gives her plus 5 HP, and I've had her go into Secret mode with like 50 HP. To be fair, I like her a lot. I don't just do this because I like her though. I think she's one of the better users for it, because again, 1-2 range, but high durability and high attacking power is Prunage incarnate. It's just so much murdering and killing. And it does suck that she doesn't have a mount. The Last Promise has a lot of good mounted units as well. But I think there's generally enough availability of mounted units that she can be rescue dropped to places if need be. You get a ton of good flyers and mounted units, but she is like, there's enough flyers to get her to the front line, and she's one of the better units to get to the front line because of her high damage output. She's pretty efficient to use actually. I do know that the tier list puts Sia like pretty low generally. I don't know what their problem is with Sia, but I just think she's really good at killing stuff and surviving stuff as well. Like, she has some of the best combat in the game overall. Her only real problem is needing robes and needing some movement help. But both of those things are available, and the alternatives of not giving them to her are generally worse. She's one of the better users of both of those resources. A little bit of movement boost and the robe. So I would put Sia honestly like maybe around Thararjan's level. So I'm not going to like boost it too much because I'm afraid of being called biased. But I do think she's one of the best mages in this series, if you can count The Last Promise series. It's just a fan hack though. I know it's not real, but goddamn, she's a powerhouse when she gets going. So that is all the mages that I know anything about. I know I didn't leave. I know I left out a couple, but as you can see, the video is plenty long already. So that's another reason I didn't want to do people like kids, people like Deirdre, Orochi. So let me know where you think those could have gone, should have gone. Let me know if my other placements are accurate or totally wrong. And I am gonna do a Patreon tier list later, where I'm gonna tier like every single Fire Emblem unit ever made. With my Patreon selecting the first units to be tiered, of course. So keep a lookout for that, and that will also be a chance to me to re-tier units a little bit if I put them in the wrong place. But yeah, gotta love those female mages. I like some of them, as you can tell. I like some of them more than others. But I think I've given most of them like a fair review. But let me know if you think differently. Let me know what other archetypes you want me to do. I have a couple in mind for sure, but your suggestions are always welcome. That's it. I'll see you guys next time. Peace and goodbye.